Welcome to another episode of KKC Consulting. With me today I have a BCG consultant, Nabeel. He's come all the way from the Toronto office. Now Nabeel, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And a very special episode because we're actually doing this in my house, the very first time. So again, special props to Nabeel for coming all the way down here. And let's just begin. So Nabeel, talk to me about your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, quick introduction about myself. Nabeel, like you mentioned, I'm a consultant based out of BCG. Been at BCG for, 3 years now.
MashaAllah.
Yeah, I know, it's been a great journey. My official title is a senior consultant, primarily because I'm closer to our Platinian or cybersecurity practice. Right? So that's kind of a specialty skill set I have, and it's a core focus area in my consulting role at BCG. Before BCG, I was doing cyber consulting at Deloitte. Did that for 2.5 years. And prior to that, I did my master's at the University of London, City University of London in cybersecurity, and did my undergrad at U of T. So quick step into my journey. But aside from work, I'm married, have a lot of family around me. That keeps my weekends extremely busy. So that's a little bit outside of work.
That's awesome. How big is your family?
Yeah, so just my wife and I at home with our parents, 2 younger sisters, and a lot of cousins.
Wow.
I can't count them on 2 hands. That's the best way to kind of put it. Yeah,
even for me, I'm about to go Pakistan in late June.
Sure.
So when I'm really thinking about the amount of cousins that I have, probably more than 15.
I know, and I feel like whenever you go to a wedding, especially if that's the reason you're going,
exactly,
you just discover so much more of your family that you had
100%.
Not known before.
100%.
Always growing.
It's so insane because you go into a wedding, and then there's people you've never seen before, and they come up to you. I used to change your diapers when you were a kid.
Oh my goodness.
It's the craziest experience because it really allows you to think hey, I really don't know that much about my family.
I feel like everyone's just trying to take credit for something at that point.
100%. Cool. But moving on, talk to me about, let's start off with your work in BCG specifically. What really led you to going down the consulting route, and how have you been liking it so far? Yeah,
it's a great question. So I think to answer the second part of your question, what led me to the consulting route, then naturally I'll address the BCG side of things. So when I was in my undergraduate, I was doing a degree in political science, right? Wasn't really too sure in terms of what I wanted to do in my career. I had explored law school. That was a consideration of mine, writing the LSAT and then going to law school, figuring that out. But I hadn't necessarily had the opportunity to take a lot of practical experience, right? Consulting itself became attractive to me through family, right? I had cousins that worked at Big Four. I had a cousin in the UK and a cousin in the US that are working at a Big Four firm. And they showed me what the day-to-day looks like. And for those that have experience consulting or aware of how it is, it changes a lot, right? Depending on the client, the type of work you're doing. And that's what interested me. I don't want to call it a lack of instability because it's expected that you're doing new work. But I think the fact you're not doing the same thing over and over again, like repetition, is what interests me the most, right? And as I think about my journey in consulting and the clients I work with, right? And of course, everyone has their own perspectives and their own ways of working and things they prefer. But I'll meet folks that have been in the same role for 8 to 10 years, and for the most part doing a very similar activity, whether it's like a third-party risk assessor, right? Or someone that's managing their organization's certificates, a little more technical. But it's the same role that I've been doing for, almost double-digit years. And I think, how can someone enjoy that, right? And again, my perspective completely. There are people that are very much happy with that. But for me, I like change, right? I like the ability to go into a project, 3 weeks, I'm on to the next thing. So that's what attracted me to consulting. Now, I think your first question was what it looks like at BCG or something along the lines. It's very much aligned with that at the firm, right? Being a consulting firm, the type of work we do is always evolving, it's changing. The clients, they change fairly often as well. We have great relationships with our clients. So, maybe like a phase 1, then a phase 2, but the type of work we do always evolves and changes, right? I could be spending 3 weeks on a cyber risk assessment. Then the next 3 weeks, I'm doing a due diligence for a private equity firm, right? It's very dynamic, it's very fluid, and that's what attracts me to it.
And that's fair because for me personally, the part that I really love about consulting is that if there's so much change happening, obviously there's going to be so much more education and learning that's going to happen as a result.
Correct.
Right? And I really love that aspect of, hey, listen, I'm going to be learning this from this project. 3 weeks later, I'm going to be learning this. Let me take advantage of it and leverage all the learnings that I can find from this and really just push myself to the limit. And then in 1 and 2 years, some people have the analogy that, hey, whatever you're learning in consulting, however many experience you have there, times it by 2. Right? Just because of how fast-paced and focused it is. And it allows you to excel in many ways. But talk to me, do you see yourself being a consultant in 3-5 years?
Yeah, it's a good question. I love what I do, right? I think going back to what I just shared about consulting and why it attracted me in the first place makes it really difficult to walk away from consulting, right? Where I'm right now, currently at BCG, I have a great team. It's a great culture fit. I really do enjoy the work, right? So I find it very challenging to think of a scenario where to walk away. I think the only time I may even consider it is if there's something in my life that needs to take more time out, right? So with consulting, especially my role, I do a lot of travel. The hours are long, which is expected. But if there's something else in my life that I have to give more attention to, and I just can't sustain, let's say the work-life balance that the firm offers or the ones I'm able to put for myself, then at that point I may need to consider looking elsewhere. But I don't foresee that happening. I feel as if where I'm currently, the work is very manageable. Although yes, it is more hours than a typical job. I think it makes sense to me. The comp aligns with what I'm working for in terms of the hours I'm spending on work, and the travel has been flexible. Like I'm allowed to say no to certain travel.
I see.
If travel makes sense for me, I can make it work. And the team members and the folks I've worked with more closely have been very accommodating with that. So yeah, in short, I don't think I'm going to see that happening.
Of course. Let's talk about some of the exit opportunities for consulting as well, because it's a very big, golden hair for it. So do you mind talking to me about your perspective for it?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those in the consulting world, I'm sort of familiar with Fishbowl, and like Fishbowl always has like a lot of people trying to find consulting exit opportunities aside from talking about all things about the firm. I think naturally when you look at the market, kind of what you said, like the 2x experience, right? I think most people that are in MBB firms in general do have the expectation that they will exit to a higher level, right? Whether you're an L3 and L4 at the firm, are you getting to like an L6 or to an L8 at like a FANG company, or where are you landing? So typically it's attractive, right? That's kind of what is at the surface. What I've seen online, and again, this could just be because, it's being framed to me in the sense that the only posts I'm seeing are people complaining, is that the reality is a little different, right? I think there's still a struggle in the market. If the job market's slow for all, it may also be slow for, exiting consultants from MBB firms. But to be honest, I haven't looked at it enough. That's just from my limited perspective. I haven't really assessed exit opportunities to begin with, but that's kind of my perspective on there.
That's fair. Let's rewind a little bit,
Sure.
right? Talking to your undergrad in poli-sci, what steps did you take to really pursue consulting as an option?
I think the first thing was interest that came in, right? So before even consulting, I first had interest in cybersecurity. And not to derail from your question, but I think it's important to answer that too,
of course,
right?
Of course.
Third year university, I had a class on foreign affairs. And in that class, there was a 1-week lecture that talked about how cybersecurity and cyber attacks are being used to dictate foreign policy. And that module or that course kind of came out of nowhere, right? It was just like a 1-week learning. It was like maybe like a Wednesday, 3 to 5 p.m. type of class. Again, this is a foreign policy class, talks about a lot of cool things, but there was like a small segment on that cyber warfare. And it wasn't even that long of a segment. I think of that 2-hour lecture, maybe it was like 20, 30 minutes. There was a little discussion on how, nation state actors are utilizing cyber warfare to influence, right? Whether you're thinking about, political ties, elections, things of that nature, right? And back when I was doing my undergrad, it wasn't necessarily like headline banner news of like involvements of like cyber warfare and politics, but there was a recognition that like countries and nation states had the ability to disrupt other nations, right, through the attack of cyber. And so we really understood and looked at how they can start to influence, right, a country's policies and what that looks like. Really interesting. That led me down a rabbit hole on, YouTube and just like Reddit and just understanding, coming across what APT means, like advanced persistent threats, learning about cybersecurity, kind of more of the, I don't call it the Hollywood of cyber, but like, it's like the interesting stuff. It's like exciting, right? Especially like coming in like, oh my God, these big hackers with all these resources that can do all this crazy stuff. So that's what introduced me to cybersecurity really early on. And that's kind of why I did my master's to do it. I think that paired with what I shared with you, the interest of consulting, was like a perfect fit. And that's kind of where I ended up where I am today.
That's very interesting, Nabeel, because even I've gone down some of the rabbit holes, but obviously not to the same extent as you. Yeah. There's one specific character, I can't exactly remember his name, but he created a system in which he literally hacked into FBI servers.
Oh wow. Okay.
And he was like 18 years old.
Is this about the space agency one or something like that?
I believe he essentially, this is the part that I remember, he called up the managing director for FBI and he just said something along the lines of, hey, you have to stop the war in a certain country, right? And it's so interesting that an 18-year-old was able to find the number On top of that, hack into the FBI servers itself.
Yeah.
There's, a massive rabbit hole, and there's actually a YouTube channel called Fern.
Right.
I love the channel so much, and it really talks about a lot of these things. And I mean, even for me, like I have a very slight experience in cybersecurity as well. Kali Linux is, the main platform I use, and my friend's dad is actually a cybersecurity professional, so he's really, helped us out on that front. But it's very interesting.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, and I can see why the transferable skills are there within cybersecurity and consulting.
Correct.
Because at the end of the day, both fields you're solving problems.
Right, and both fields are also constantly evolving. Right, with consulting, it's kind of what I shared earlier about the different clients, the different types of work you're doing. With cybersecurity, it's like technologies as it innovates, right? So is your attack surface as well, right? With AI, now there may be like new threat vectors, right? Different types of attacks we're now seeing in the place. There's new attacks being launched, new campaigns happening. So new frameworks being developed, right? Whether it's like more robust cryptography, right? Or whether it's like better controls on banking systems, things are always changing, right? And I think that for me is the core dragging principle for both cybersecurity and consulting.
100%. And on that front, I actually want to kind of get a lens of your thought process in third year. So you decided that, hey, I really love cybersecurity. It's something I want to pursue in. So from there, did you really consider going down the cybersecurity pathway? Or you heard about consulting and you saw, hey, there's transferable skills within this and it's constantly evolving. I want to be able to combine both my passions.
I went cyber first. Yeah. So I think once the interest of cybersecurity came, that's what I kind of chased at the beginning. One thing, however, that I recognized that I didn't have a technical background. Right. This is where I'll go into a bit of my story. So after the political science introduction and I learned about cybersecurity, again, just a lot of YouTubing and Reddit, I then wanted to determine what was the best way to get credentialized. Or be competitive in the market for any cybersecurity postings. And at that time, there weren't any master's programs in Canada. I think UOIT was maybe doing one. That's the one in Oshawa, I believe, right? UOIT?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. So I think they were doing a cybersecurity master's program, but no one else was. I think now there's a lot more universities that are doing it.
Right.
And so I had a great opportunity at the University of London with a one-year accelerated master's program. So I applied to that. One of the things that they'd highlighted was my lack of technical experience, right?
Sure.
Not knowing how to code, right, was a big one. Even the maths, right? Like when you look at some aspects of like cryptography, you need to know some of the maths around that, algorithms, right? So there's a big concern from their part. And before accepting me in the program, they required that I do some foundational courses, right, and pass with a certain grade. And thankfully I was able to do that. But one thing it showcased to me was that I didn't necessarily have the technical backing, right, or background to really get on that technical side of cybersecurity, right? So I think about going to cyber first. The reason why consulting became such a now transition and the type of consulting I do is because I enjoyed the more core strategy of it, right? And strategy is something very broad term, right? A lot of folks interpret a lot of different ways. Are you strategizing how to inform a board, right? Are you doing an assessment across, the different business units across an organization, right? For me, when I look at the cyber strategy of an organization or cyber strategy that I was involved in, it was, what are some of the top-down ways that you can influence and enforce robust cyber practices across an organization, right? And whether that's through an assessment, whether that's through doing a tabletop exercise, whether that's through helping an organization develop the right policies and processes in place, that to me was a lot more attractive than being the person that's like breaking a system on a computer, right? Or the person that's like reverse engineering some malware. Not that it's not as interesting, but I also didn't have the skill set for that, right? Because I didn't know how to program. I had very limited coding knowledge, and the strategy side appealed to me more. So because of that, consulting became a lot more appealing. Firms like Deloitte, where I was doing strategy consulting, BCG, where I am right now, I don't do the technical side of things, right? I'm not hacking. I'm not doing red teaming. It's purely strategy.
Moving on that, when did you decide that, hey, I want to move into Deloitte? Because, a little bit of context. Before BCG, you were at Deloitte. You had a stint over there. So talk to me about that experience.
Yeah, so I think it stems from the whole understanding consulting through my family members, right? I think it's obviously a very attractive place to work. And, to a certain extent, I was chasing the banner, right? A lot of students know that Big Four firms and folks in the market understand that Big Four firms hold a certain pedigree. And, when you're a new graduate, you're coming with a lot of energy, you want to chase the pedigree, right? And that's exactly what I want to do. And why not? So I applied to all the Big Four. I was very fortunate to get offers from all of them. And Deloitte to me stood out because not only through my cousin, I had a great experience with them, right? When I met with them, I did the interviews. The team was amazing. The folks I interviewed with were great. And what I started doing a lot as those interviews companies was I was looking at their thought leadership. So a lot of that is looking at the articles that they publish and some of the material that they have. And some of the material that Deloitte was publishing in the cyberspace was very attractive to me at that time, right? That's one report about the different personas of cybersecurity, kind of like the different like roles. It's kind of like a broader racy in a way, like for cyber specific, but it's very interesting, right? And it was able to facilitate a really healthy conversation when I was in the Deloitte pipeline for the interviews. And that's what really drew me towards it. But yeah, to answer your question, not to make it too long, Big Four pedigree, right? I interviewed with all four. Ultimately chose Deloitte just because of the better cultural fit.
I mean, number one, I do want to say time has passed since then, but congratulations on all four.
No, thank you. Appreciate it.
Very, very impressive.
Yeah.
Another point that I do want to add, I've heard that BCG is known for cybersecurity, right? And it's definitely something on the radar just for that reason, because it's, you know, it's kind of cool, right? You're helping businesses be able to prevent attacks that could cost them millions, sometimes even billions of dollars. Right? And that's going to lead me to my next question. It's going to be a long one. Feel free to take out whatever you want from this. Cybersecurity over the years has proven itself to be important. And we talked about this in our coffee chat as well, in the sense that before 20 years ago, it wasn't too important. People didn't think too much of it. Now it's becoming more and more relevant. Talk to me about how that demand for cybersecurity really influenced your choices and your job opportunities.
Yeah, so to answer your question directly, so the demand for cybersecurity influenced my choices. Yeah, I think, especially as a university, cyber started becoming big news. And it's very natural, right? If you think 20 years ago, the data that we had online was nowhere near as valuable, or even in quantity, wasn't nearly as much as we have now, right? They say like data is gold, right? Every company else operates on some degree of data, some degree of algorithm. You know, go on Instagram, like the algorithm knows you so well. So there's like, data is really important, right? We know that. That's like a caveat statement. But different types of data have varying types of importance, right? And I think especially as technology scales and organizations moved from like $1 million companies to $1 billion companies, the one core factor between all of them is that data grows, right? And I think naturally as folks start seeing that, then they start to realize the importance of having the guardrails to protect that data, right? Because that data, not only is it very personable to folks, but it has a lot of other impacts associated with it too. There could be like operational impacts with a cyber attack, right? If a server goes down and customers can't check out a website, there could be legal impacts, right? I mean, if a certain type of PHI is lost, right? So there's a lot of impacts that organizations start to realize earlier on as they start to scale in their more broader technology, advancements and things of that nature. And I think what that did is it created a big opportunity in the job market, right, for cybersecurity. I know it's still a hot field. I still think it is. I mean, obviously roles are hard to come by nowadays, generally across the board. But cybersecurity in particular has been always on top of minds, right? Because it's something that has to be considered as you start innovating, right? You think of like AI, is there any sort of cybersecurity implications there? Yeah,
of course.
The changing attack surface, right? I mean, like maybe attacks get more sophisticated. Like what are some of the more tools and processes we got now put in place to be ready for what's coming, right? And maybe like further down the road, I mean, we think about like quantum computing and, what are some of the implications of that? There's a lot of things we consider from a cybersecurity standpoint. So I think wherever you start to innovate, there has to be some degree of consideration for cybersecurity. So to answer your question, naturally, I've noticed that the job market has opened up quite a bit. I think organizations are more ready to get people from cybersecurity on. I think the biggest transition has been like enterprise organizations have always had the budget to do certain things.
Of course.
Where it gets more challenging is with the mid-market, SMBs, of course. But the great thing is now, like a lot of cybersecurity models are all like SaaS-based, right? Like they'll have like a security operations center that may work virtually. You don't necessarily need to hire the cyber expertise in-house, right? So a lot of companies will offer you the ability to like monitor your network away from your environment, right?
Oh, so you could also offshore them.
Correct, right? Like you have a company that's like plugged into your environment, they're in your server, they're just monitoring, right? If they catch something, hey, something's going wrong, right? So you don't necessarily need the full-time staff or as many, right? Again, I say with a grain of salt because every organization has different risk thresholds.
100%.
One organization may not be as worried about losing their data as say maybe a hospital or a pharmacy, right? Every risk tolerance changes. Right? What may be critical for one organization may not be critical for the other. And then through understanding that risk landscape and what matters for you, what doesn't matter for you, that's where you start to infer and determine what does my cyber budget actually look like? Do I need people, or like can certain things be offshored? Do I need to have someone on site to help me develop more tailored awareness training programs to deliver to my people? Do I need someone on site to talk to our vendors? Like if we have like 500 vendors we share data with, who's going to make sure that my data is protected with these vendors? Because if I give my data to Amar right? Like I own this data. Like I have a list of like 100 customers. I give it to you and it gets leaked. You're not gonna get blamed. I am, right? Because even though we're sharing the data, it's still my responsibility to make sure it's good. So like you gotta have someone in place to do those assessments. It's a very broad domain, right? With a lot of moving parts. But I think that's kind of the best way I can show it to you. There will always be a job demand. It's been very hot. Will that change in the future? Maybe, right? But I think as of right now, it's still a field that's recruiting quite heavily.
100%. Moving on, there's a massive misconception about the fact that, hey, as soon as you leave undergrad, if you make into Big Four, you're staying in Big Four. If you make into Tier 2, you're staying there. Likewise for MBB.
Right.
However, you prove that point to be, as I said, a misconception. Talk to me about the process from switching from Big Four to going into MBB.
Yeah. When you say process, are more like tactical steps or kind of like more broadly what made me do it?
Both.
Sure. Okay. So I think first I'll focus on like the switch and the reason why I did it, right? Very happy at Deloitte. We had a fantastic team. And like I said, I came out of my education extremely enthusiastic. I did a master's in cybersecurity. I was great in the field. I did abroad, I was living with some family there. But I mean, I didn't have my friends there, right? So it was like every day I was like breathing cyber, as nerdy as that sounds. I'd be listening to like podcasts and like reading news articles on the way to the university. I was extremely involved, right? And I love the field, I love everything about it. So when I started Deloitte, I was really happy that the passion I had was well received with the folks I was working with. I had great partners at the firm, a senior manager who's now a partner who was also great. And they naturally nurtured me very well. And it's what helped me start my professional career. Right? I think when I look back now, the struggle to even make a PowerPoint or to even walk a client through a complex topic was extremely intimidating and very challenging, right? So at Deloitte, amazing experience, right? Ultimately, what it came down for me was comp, right? And I think that's something that people need to be transparent about when it comes to working at the places they do. I have no issue being transparent about that being an issue of why I need to change roles, but it came down to comp ultimately, right? I was really happy with the environment at Deloitte, right? Like I said, great team, great work. Ultimately, it was comp, right? The work at Deloitte that I was doing was also strategy, right? I then started learning more about BCG, McKinsey, and being MBB firms in general. And I know that McKinsey and BCG both had cyber practices, right? When I started learning more about BCG, what I learned is they're a lot more intimate and a lot more tailored in their approach, right? When I was at Deloitte, I may be saying this wrong, so hopefully this is incorrect, but it's like 140 cyber practitioners, maybe more or less across Canada. Sure. A lot of cyber practitioners, right? That do a lot of different types of work, right? You have like strategy, you have like incident response, you have monitoring, so a lot of varying roles. At BCG, it was like core consultants, right? You're doing strategy work, right? That's the type of work you're doing. Your client isn't, let's say, the director. You're talking to the VP, you're talking to the SVP or the C-suite, right? So it's just a different type of approach, different type of game. And so with what I want to do in terms of more strategy focus, what I showed you earlier, it was much better aligned at BCG, right? You're getting the boardrooms, you're getting from the C-suite, you're driving strategy from the top down. You're solving problems across the enterprise as a whole, not just a business unit. And that was the biggest change I noticed when I came to BCG, right? So that was kind of what pushed me to go to BCG from Deloitte.
This is going to be a bit of a curveball question.
Sure.
But earlier you mentioned how at times you're not talking to the manager, maybe you're talking to someone a little bit below.
Right.
And it reminded me of, you may be familiar with him, Victor Cheng. He mentions how when you're in consulting, the type of questions you ask are very, very important.
Right.
You have to be extremely concise and you have to understand that you can't ask a million questions. The budget isn't there, it takes time, all these certain restrictions. So how are you able to go into a field or a client site, be able to ask the least amount of questions possible, really be concise with that?
I don't think you necessarily have to ask the least amount of questions possible, right? I don't think that's the right approach.
I see.
I think ultimately depends on who your client is and what degree of enthusiasm are they showing, right?
I see.
I've had clients that we've had a 30-minute call scheduled and they themselves want to go for the full hour because they really want to paint me the full picture, right? Or they're just very excited about the work that we're doing and they generally want to share great ideas. I've been on calls where it's the exact opposite, right? It's like, oh my God, another consultant. I've had a client say that to me,
really?
Right? Like I haven't even introduced myself, nothing.
Wow.
Another consultant call. And this is when I was a lot junior, so thankfully I had a manager who handled that very well. But yeah, you get like both sides of the coin. It's very like perspective based, right? Like you have to understand that consultants mean different things to different people on the surface, right? MBB firms have been associated with layoffs, right? Like you think about like a McKinsey coming in or like BCG coming in, there's a perception by some people that, oh my God, org remodel, right? Or if you're doing an assessment, there's a perception that, oh my God, we're doing an assessment because we're gonna have an audit coming in soon. People start to get worried and scared, right? So what you have to do is set the right level of expectation and context. I think that is one one of the most impressive skills and important skills a consultant can do, or anyone in a consulting organization. You have to make the person feel comfortable, right? And the work we're doing a lot of times, well, I mean, it's for the benefit of the business,
right?
That's what we're trying to. So how do you get that point across and let people know? And there's different techniques to do it, right? One is show them the value for them specifically, right? Not an organization value. What does it mean for a Mars role, right? Why does it matter to you? Like, how can this benefit you? Why does you taking 30 minutes out of your time help you specifically? Are there any downstream impacts from me doing this remodel that I'm doing? Why does it matter to you, right? So I think it's okay to have those hour-long conversations. It's okay to ask those questions, assuming that that's what the person wants, right? Always read the room, understand your client, provide the best level of context you can, and you take it from there.
Talk to me about how important emotional intelligence is in consulting.
We're in the people business, right? I always talk to my team about saying, like, look, the work gets done, right? I think EQ is incredibly important, and it's a skill that I still work on, and a lot of people do, right? I think technical work, you learn it. You understand the framework. You learn how to make slides. Maybe there's like certain aspects like storylining and such that you still work on throughout your career. But there's certain like the harder skills that you get the hang of eventually, right? And how to do things. EQ is where it gets challenging, right? Because really a lot of times you learn from being in a situation itself. Like, it's hard to prepare for an EQ type of dynamic, right? And the best example I think of happened recently. And I had someone more senior on my team did something that I was really impressed by, right? We had like a pretty intense presentation, right? There's like a lot of clients, a little difficult to manage client as well. So we know that they may be on the fence and there may be some questions and maybe some doubts in the work that we're doing. And we had gone in with a structure of how we're going to present, like you always do, right? Like you have maybe like a dry run or some voice notes or voice track notes. And the original plan was to spend, I think like maybe like 10-ish minutes on making sure this client had the context we've been doing for the last few months. And just get them up to speed, let them know that, hey, this is what's been going on, this is what we're doing. And after the context is given, we then jump into kind of what we need from them. Right? Ask the questions. When the client joined the call, the first thing they said is, I'm underwater, I have so many things going on, like I'm so busy, this is like, I don't have enough time to do these things. What did that senior person do? That 10-minute context setting, 40 seconds. That's it.
Wow.
Jump straight to questions. I'm respectful of your time. Here's the context. Do you have any questions on that? No. Boom, let's go ahead. So it's the ability to pivot and move away from the script as you need to, right?
Adaptability.
Exactly. And it's a lot easier said than done. But a lot of times you're in that situation and you're talking with a very senior client stakeholder, whether it's like a C-suite, it can be intimidating at times, right? Because you're going with the plan. And for some people, it's harder to move away from a plan from others. I'll admit it. Sometimes it's harder for me to move away from a plan, right? If I have a big presentation or a big workshop I'm doing in person and I'm rehearsing like how I'm going to present, how I'm going to answer questions, curveball comes or like you realize that the client isn't following along, you have to adapt, right? You got to flip. You can't be married to your deck either, right? Like if I have like a storyline of like I'm going through slide 1 to 8, but all of a sudden they ask me a question about what's on slide 6, I'm not going to go be like, oh, great question. We'll get to that in a second. Absolutely not. I'm flipping that slide. Right. I'm like, oh, it's amazing. Thank you for bringing that up. We were going to talk about that. Let's jump into it right now. So I think being able to be flexible, reading the EQ, extremely important.
It's interesting because for me, I'm working in a startup, as I mentioned earlier on, and even being able to understand exactly what your boss wants, exactly what needs to be done, and being okay with the fact that, hey, you're not going to get it perfect the first time. You need to restructure sometimes. And I feel that was a weakness of mine before I joined Manzil as a whole. Just the fact that I was very used to, okay, I'm setting aside 30 minutes to complete this work for KKC.
Yeah.
I don't need more than 30 minutes. I'm going to get like 100 out of 100 in the work that I'm doing. I can post it and it'll be completely fine.
Right.
Whereas now it's a little bit different. I set aside the 30 minutes, it turns into an hour.
Right.
And then with that, there's always going to be new improvements. Being able to very carefully be attention to detail. That's something very important that I learned from Manzil, especially from my boss. So being able to have that attention to detail, and honestly, Manzil has provided a really great learning platform, and it really just reminded me of the fact that, hey, sometimes you really just need to understand the room, but also you don't have to be married to your deck, as 100%. You mentioned, and you don't have to be married to the ideas that you have. Things happen, things shift around. You just have to be able to be conscious of that and be able to say, hey, it's completely okay. Maybe this turns around to something new.
Right. And you highlighted a really great point there too about the whole 100% story, right? Like you want to get something right at 100% there. One of the things that I've seen at the firm, it's a challenge for a lot of folks, is setting the right expectations, right? I'm talking like more specifically like junior to like more senior staff, right? You have a task you have to do. it's so important to have that conversation with the person more senior in terms of what their expectations are. Hey, let's say Amar, you're my boss. Hey, would it be okay if I just get a very rough looking slide, right, and just send it to you the next like 3 hours or 2 hours, just to see if I'm on the right track, right? Or would you prefer that like I message you end of day with what I think is perfect, and then I get your feedback, right? And typically, what I always hear from the folks I work with is like they prefer to review something quicker to see if you're on the right track, right? I think as you get more senior, you get more reps in, that may change, but you have to have that conversation, right? I mean, you can't expect your boss or your manager or your partner, whatever it may be, to be chasing you down and asking for these updates, 100%. Right? And like, again, everyone's different working styles. I'm just giving this perspective of mine. My personal preference is, if you gotta fail fast, right? I think I've seen instances and heard instances of someone that's working on something for 2 days and they finally get feedback and it's all completely wrong.
Right.
Like you just wasted 2 days, right?
Exactly.
Get the storyline out first. I'm just using a deck as an example, but this can be applied more broadly. Get the storyline out, get the feedback quick, and start building accordingly, right? And naturally what you do is you put a lot more checks and balances in the process, right? And it's kind of like a fine battle of balancing it between not overexerting the amount of feedback you're trying to get and also looping in the person you're talking to. So it's not like you make a change and be like, hey, how's this look? How's this look? How's that look now, right? It's you more broadly understand the direction things need to go. You validate it, you build. You need to pivot something, you validate once more, you build, right? No surprises, things are delivered well, and the person that's managing you has that insight. So to your point about the 100%, just going back to that, it's so important to set those expectations up front, right? Or it's going to result in a lot of churn, a lot of stress as well, a lot of last minute changes, and just overall frustration on the project.
On that point, actually, and I'll give a little bit of context, I'm trying to build an app, KKC Classroom,
right,
in which it's essentially, I don't know if I can legally say this, but I'll just cut it out, the Khan Academy for breaking into consulting and investment banking.
Right.
Now, thankfully, I was able to have some app developers to come on the team. Everything's been going really smoothly, but I really feel that the main reason everything has been going smoothly is just because of the fact that we were able to set expectations from the beginning.
Right.
We said, hey, listen, work on this page. It's not going to take you too long. We have ChatGPT, the best engineer in the world.
Right.
It's not going to take you long. Spend 2 days on it. We're going to have a quick call. We'll see how the page is going. We'll make edits on it, and then we'll change it from there, right? And it's helped so much, because sometimes I think to myself, if I just told them, hey, just get five of these pages done in the next 2 weeks, and then they come on the call, everyone's 5 pages are completely different. We can't put them together.
Correct.
The main coder is just going to have to change everything up again. It's a waste of time.
Exactly.
That's why I really prefer, like, I actually always say this to the KKC team, whether it's KKC Consulting or Classroom. Over communication is something I prefer.
Right.
Annoy me as much as you want, just never under communicate.
Right.
Right. And I feel my boss shares the same sentiment about
me.
Yeah,
it's great. And like that's exactly what the key you said there, right? Your preference, right? So it's so important to align with the ways of working, the way people do it. So I think, especially in the consulting world, when you have that first interaction with that new PL or that new partner or that new principal, you have that conversation, right? It's like, what do you prefer? Like, what works for you? Oh, this is what works for me. Like, is there a middle ground we can find? How can we mediate this, right? It's better to have that conversation than leave it a surprise, kind of like the way you just shared.
100%.
Yeah.
Moving on, let's talk about the soft skills.
Sure.
Right? And it's very interesting because, and I'm not exaggerating this at all, you have some of the best communication skills that I've ever witnessed, right?
Thanks.
Now, no worries. On that, how are you able to really develop your listening skills and your communication skills? Because those two things, people tend to separate, but they're so integrated together. It's very, very important, especially in consulting.
Yeah, it's challenging. There's different tips and tricks to do it. But I think the first thing is kind of what you just mentioned, right? Being able to separate both of those effectively, right? What I find, the way that my communication style is, I tend to speak a little faster, right? And also I feel like when an idea comes, I have to get it out.
Yeah.
I just have to say something. It's like if I don't say I do in the next 5 seconds, I'm gonna forget it and it's just gone forever, right? And naturally, because of like the speaking fast, I want to get an idea out quickly. I also struggle with pauses, right? Not that I can't do them, but a 1 second pause feels like an eternity to me, right? So I think the first thing is understanding your strengths, right? So being able to understand, okay, look, there's listening skills, there's then be able to like communicate skills, where do I lack and what things can I work on, right? And to be fair, everyone struggles with it, right? There's different struggles people have, whether it's talking too fast, whether it's dictating, whether it's not being able to like present and allow, pauses and the client to speak. for the most part, everyone I worked with has something that they can improve on, right? So for me specifically, once I identify those problems through, my team, through feedback, I then try to look at some actionable steps. For example, if I have to say something and I feel like I just have to get it out while someone's saying something, I write it down, right? If I need to take a pause, I'll look at the client's face when I finish a slide, or I'll know in my head, like, okay, at this slide, when I talk about this second thing in the middle column, I will pause. So I'll like forcefully put pauses. Like I'm more cautious and conscious about the pause, right? So those are some of the things that I do more tactically to get better at it. But ultimately, it's just like most things in the world, reps. You gotta get the reps in, right? And the thing is, people also communicate and listen differently in differing situations of stress, right? I recently, like 6-7 months ago, had the opportunity to present to BCG Canada.
Wow.
Right? It was awesome. It was a very short presentation. It was a panel. And on that panel, they were asking me some questions about Gen AI, right? And I think, I appreciate you sharing as well, but I also believe I'm a great listener and communicator and some of my strong skill sets. When I was on stage, right, and I looked to my left, it was just like flashing lights everywhere, like really bright white lights, and there was like maybe 500 people there, 600 people there. And I remember like the person probably sitting where you are right now, and they're asking a question. And I don't know what happened, but the question that person asked me, I didn't hear a damn word. The person it just like, I don't know what, just saw their mouth move, and I guess just because my heart was going like this, and I never, I'm not scared of presenting. I enjoy presenting. I think it's a lot of fun. But that was like the first time that I was like on a stage with lights in front of me. I've been on stages before. I've been in front of like 100 people, 200 people, no problem. But something about it being my BCG colleagues, right? Because it's your coworkers, right?
Right.
Normally you feel more comfortable. I felt more nervous. I'd much rather present to 500 random people, but like present to 500 colleagues at BCG. It just went in one year, out the other, right? And I hope I answered the question. I'm sure I did. But I pieced together whatever I could. So I think that also plays a big part, right? Like, what's the level of sort of like, are you tense in that situation, right? Are you feeling some degree of ambiguity, right? Are you stressed about it, right? I think all those things paired together ultimately point to one thing: get the reps in, right? And as you get the reps in, start seeking feedback. Identify where your shortcomings are in the communication, the listening, and then start to find tactical ways to address it.
There's 2 points I could actually touch just on that front. It's a stupid story, but in grade 12, so last year, I had a horrible habit of having filler words. And I don't know if you realize I haven't said a single filler word in this podcast specifically, but I used to say it constantly. Right? What I actually told my friends was, anytime I say a filler word, if I say whatever it might be, if I'm not taking a pause, just slap me. Just that. Yeah. So they would do it so much that it got to the point where I was like, hey, I don't have to say it anymore, right? And of course, there's going to be the occasional slip up,
right?
But it really did.
Was it a really painful experience?
It was a very painful experience.
Because actually, one part of your face got really red, probably. Yeah. Oh, that's tough.
The horrible thing about having friends is that you tell them something, they'll multiply it by degree of 5. Of course. When I say slap, I mean like, okay, that's all you have to do. It gets the point across. But they'll... Right?
Hey, you give the freebie, you get the freebie, right? Yeah. Oh, I assume to be slapping your face. That's terrible. Yeah, probably slapping your hand, right? Yeah. No, 100%. You give them the freebie, they'll take it. It's like, give an inch, they'll take a mile, right? Yeah.
And the second point that I wanted to take is... So I did a podcast a few months prior with the CEO of Munzel, Dr. Sawaf. Yeah. Fantastic guy. He's very warm. He's a great person overall. I was just very nervous. It's my boss's boss, right? Of course. So, and I'm the youngest person on the team. I feel like I need this sense of, I got to impress him or I got to show him something, right? So while we're talking, it's so interesting. He was so calm and, for lack of better terms, nonchalant. But I was the exact opposite. I was stressing. I'm pretty sure my hand was shaking a little bit. I had to hide it under the table. But slowly, after some time, what I realized is, hey, listen, the other person next to me, yes, they're my CEO, but it's just another human being. Right. And it's a human being who cares about me. It's a human being who's, yes, he's my boss, but at the end of the day, it's not like he's going to bite me. Right?
Yeah.
And just being able to have that, just confront that fear, it allowed for such a great conversation where we really went into depth about his journey starting Munzel and all the little cons and hidden things that came as a result of that.
Yeah. No, it's great. And you just illustrate a perfect way for people to overcome that fear, right? It's starting to normalize a person, right? Like, I think it's a funny way. It's actually kind of entendre, to normalize a person. It's a person. It's normal. Yeah. But I guess like make it more real for you, right? Like this is a human being. This is someone that, you know, has a life. They have a family. They have hobbies that they do.
Right.
Right. Like
right.
it makes it more real to you. Right. I do think there are instances where not doing that may allow you to present better. Okay. For example, if I know that the client I'm about to go through or talk with is, you know, if I present well, will be the result of a $10 million deal, right? Or a $15 million deal, whatever it may be.
Wow.
I'll be more pressurized,
Sure.
right? I'll be more stressed. But because of that, I will spend more time preparing. I will spend more time making sure I know all my stuff as well as I can. So I think to a certain degree, like, I don't call it a kick in the ass, but maybe for lack of a better term, like some degree of stress can be helpful at times. Maybe stress is the wrong term, but just understand that, like, look, there's an expectation for something, you want to meet it, and that's going to drive your ability to make sure you're more prepared.
Adrenaline.
Right. Yeah.
And it's interesting because even for me, if I have to get something done, the adrenaline that comes from it, where I'm like, hey, it needs to be done like ASAP.
Right.
I did a massive mess up. Like I'll give you this, example. I went to Toronto. I was meeting up with a mentor. He's a fantastic person. Now, last minute, I realized that I completely messed up for Munzel. Absolutely messed up, and I actually got a call from my boss. Now, I had two options. Number one, I could have just ignored the call, right? Or number two, I could have just confronted the call. I would have just said, hey, my bad. I apologize. It won't happen again. Let me fix this up really quickly. And the adrenaline that I had, I finished that out super fast.
Yeah.
And it really allowed me to say like, hey, I gotta meet this person like right now.
Yeah.
But I obviously can't tell my boss, yeah, I'll do it later. It's all good.
Yeah.
Right? So the adrenaline really helps.
It does.
It really does help.
Yeah.
I want to take a pivot from this conversation specifically. Let's talk about more of the technical skills. I want to say technical for consulting, in specifically casing.
Sure.
Everyone knows that casing is at least the majority, like I would say 50% of your interview process.
Right.
Number one, do you share that sentiment? Number two, talk to me about cases.
Sure. So for my interview process, right, I was interviewing both McKinsey and BCG at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah. From my experience, I got to final rounds for both. Ultimately chose BCG. But in my experience, the firms would do it a different way, right? Particularly because since I was applying to a cybersecurity specific role, what I found is that my BCG experience was more specific to cyber cases, whereas my McKinsey experience was more general cases. Like they weren't tailored to cybersecurity in any way, shape, or form. At BCG, I was meeting folks that I'd be working with specifically. At McKinsey, I didn't meet them till the very final round.
I see.
Right. So it's like in that pipeline of interviews at BCG, it was like all cyber team related, all the folks in the cyber team, and it's a very intimate team. It's like 40 people, North American wide. 40,
wow,
45.
North American, 50.
Yep, 50 people in the cybersecurity practice. Again, maybe even less, maybe 45. But a very intimate team. And I'm talking like external facing consultants, right? So our external facing team, I'm sure the internal team that like helps us is a lot larger than that, but the external consulting team, right? So very intimate interview process. I was meeting people I was working with, and therefore the cases were more cyber focused. So I'll focus on those first, and I'll tell you more about the experience at McKinsey. So the cyber cases were very straightforward, primarily because I was working at Deloitte, right? So I knew the frameworks. It wasn't hard to navigate the cases. The questions that were being asked made a lot of sense. There are problems and challenges I faced before. There was anything that was like different, right? That being said, when I had BCG and McKinsey interviews, they were happening around the same time, like maybe like a week or 2 weeks separate.
Wow.
So the great thing about that is that it allowed me to prep like at the same time for both, right? So you
didn't have to re-prep.
Exactly. I had to re-prep. And what I did is when I had an idea these interviews were coming, or when it finally became formal that, hey, you're invited to the first round, like let's chat, I took myself to my basement, locked the door, and just got to work, right?
Right.
YouTube videos, cases, going on all their websites of like McKinsey, BCG, Bain, their sample cases they have on there, even like Deloitte, Big Four cases, like anywhere I could find a case, I was doing it, right? Getting a piece of paper, breaking it down. And, I never found it challenging for like the case of like asking questions or framing it through a certain model or framework. That part's always been easy to me. It comes very naturally. Where I struggle with is where you deal with some degree of quant, right? Where you get like a graph, you have to infer something, or like just not even infer, but just like take that extra step of thinking to like determine that, hey, like why is this way the way it is, right? Is there some of this graph is telling me, or these 4 visuals I have, which ways visuals tells me I need to know? So that's where I struggled a little bit, right? So I just a lot of reps in. That's the way the prep went. But again, for BCG, very cyber specific, very natural. McKinsey was general, right? Like you expect at any case interview for anyone going for a consulting role or an associate role. I can't remember what the cases were like exactly, but again, you do enough cases online, you get enough reps in, it kind of becomes, I won't say second nature.
Thank God.
But yeah, it does help out a lot, right? Like those things help. And like for me, it was always like the whole internal, external when it comes to frameworks, right? Like, oh, internally you look at these things, externally look at those things. So that always helped. And as soon as I would get a case, the first thing I would do is just immediately ask questions. I wouldn't assume anything, right? Or if I do want to assume, I'll say like, can I assume this, right? So I think having that dialogue is very important early in a case because it showcases to an interviewee or interviewer rather that, you know, this person is asking the right questions, they're willing to dive in a little more, they're sharing with their assumptions. And I think it naturally makes the person that's interviewing you more accepting of the framework you're about to propose, right? Because that framework we built on the assumptions and the questions that you just asked, right? So they're naturally able to question it less, right? So that's kind of the case experience went for me. Really great, lots of reps in. But again, that quant part's always a little challenging for me personally.
And that's fair. I really do appreciate the advice.
Yeah.
Number one, it's really helpful for me.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it's helpful for the audience as well. It's great how you were able to really break it down to what you felt your strengths were and what your weaknesses were. That leads me to another question, actually. How many cases did you think you did for prep?
Oh my goodness. I'm trying to think of a number for it. The whole week, 2 or 3 weeks was a blur, to be honest with you.
Wow.
I think I had like a 2 or 3 weeks heads up, so I was doing cases every day. I think honestly, like in the hundreds, I would say like triple digits for sure.
Wow.
Like anything I could find. I don't know what this PDF was called. I came across this one PDF. I don't know if I was on like MBA prep type of website. It had like 150 cases just in that PDF file.
Wow.
It's crazy. And then obviously every website or like big 4 MBB firms would have like 5 to 10 cases on their website. So I would do those. And then a bunch of YouTube videos for cases. I'll look at those as well. I'm just a person that generally that when you get an opportunity, I don't want to waste it, right? So for me, it's like I'm working this amazing job at Deloitte, and I have this like, you know, amazing opportunity now to join BCG or McKinsey, and all I have is like 2 or 3 weeks to prepare for it. I am not gonna let that go, right? Like I'm just gonna give it my all, check every resource I can, right? Understand it the best way I can as well. And I didn't go to business school either, right? I do an MBA, right? I didn't even take business courses, so the whole aspect of case thankfully came to me very naturally, but it was like very new for me. Like I hadn't experienced it till I got into consulting, right? When I had my interviews with the big 4, right? That's when I like really understood like, okay, what a case is, how it works, how you structure it, how do you approach it, right? So thankfully it came to me very naturally. Again, just the quant part, but sorry, it was a long-winded answer to your question, but no, it was definitely triple digits.
It was a great answer. Yeah. I mean, even for me specifically, I feel that cases can be very difficult. But I feel when you get the reps in, there's a certain formula that comes out after. Right. And that's what I'm trying to replicate with, you know, KKC Classroom, because obviously casing is probably going to be one of the biggest sections to it.
Yeah.
And the great part about it is for KKC Classroom, I'm essentially doing the prep that I have to do anyway, but now I'm just documenting my journey and putting it inside the app. And on top of that, I'm going to get external consultants, making sure everything that's in it is safe and sound.
That's just great.
Right.
And I think one thing you got to take advantage of for sure is the conversation you have during a case. That's the one thing you don't get reps in when you're doing casework prep.
Interesting.
Right, because you develop the formula, let's say, right? You get like the framework and the approach. But a big part of the casing is the questions you're asking, right? Like if you're leading the case and you give me a scenario, like do you have the reps in how to ask the right questions? If you're making assumptions, do you have the reps in to understand what assumptions are viable, what aren't? Right? So I think that's a muscle that may not be exercised as much during case prep. So I think it's always helpful to like see a live case interview. I found those on YouTube as well, and just like try to understand. And then obviously if you have someone that's, you know, an ex-consultant or currently doing consulting, whatever it may be, just ask them to like, you know, run you through a case and be able to have that person that you can then ask questions and they can like give you more context. And that's one part that doesn't get practiced as much.
You're right, because there's this one Bain video and you've probably seen it.
Yeah.
It was, I can't remember exactly the title of it, but it was a live case. And I remember when I first saw it, I thought, hey, cases are super easy. You just ask the questions, you get the questions.
Yeah.
You know, it makes sense. But when I actually tried it for the first time, okay.
Yeah.
Imagine doing this to a degree where your job's on the line. Right. So it's very nerve-wracking. But
they can be intimidating, yeah.
Yeah. Talk to me about how, you know, you were able to prep for asking the questions.
Yeah. So for me, I think, man, I don't want to sound like as if this is such a natural thing for me, but to a certain degree it is, right? I think when I see a problem or when I see a story that someone outlines in a case, there's just natural questions that come up, right? And
I can tell even for this podcast.
Right, yeah. So like, I feel like as if like if someone's explaining something, kind of like the way your podcast works as well, right? Like if I share with you a story, you naturally want to dig deeper and ask questions, right? So I think it's being able to have that same type of curiosity in a case environment. Now, my understanding, a lot of people have that naturally, right? They're curious, they want to ask questions. You share something really cool with someone that you meet outside, they want to ask you questions and learn more about it, right? For the most part. The issue is that in an interview format, you have the added layer of stress, right? And that's why people shy away from being curious and asking those questions. Like if that case was portrayed to you with your friends sitting down, right, at a coffee shop, you'll ask probably a lot more questions. Like, oh, it's so cool. Like, how do they do this? Like, is it true that, like, you know, this specific, education body wants to open these schools in this region? Like, how would they do it? Like, how many schools do they want to open, right? Is there like a lot of like houses near these schools? Like, throwing a bunch of examples at you. But I'm trying to showcase is that it becomes a lot easier to ask these questions in environments where you're comfortable, right? I don't think it's difficult to ask questions. I think it's difficult to be comfortable to ask them in the first place.
Wow. That was great. That was a great quote. But I mean, with that, Nabeel, thank you so much for sharing all your insights.
Of course.
I understand, time really did flow by. So thank you so much for sharing all your insights. And, I really do appreciate it.
No, it's great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad I could be a part of the first podcast in the basement. Hope this backdrop's a lot better than the other one. But no, thank you so much for having me. It's been a great conversation.
Of course.
Yeah.
And back to you guys. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Please feel free to subscribe and like. You can check out Nabeel's LinkedIn as well. It will be in the comment section. Thank you very much.